This is Harry Murray in Murray's Fly Shop in Edinburgh, Virginia. Let's talk about the leaders that we're using for the majority of our smallmouth bass fishing. We like to use a compound, hand-tied, knotted, tapered leader because we find these cast very smoothly. It lets us turn over the big flies that we want to use, and we are able to achieve very good accuracy with it. This is a setup actually showing how we set up a reel. We take the new reel right off the shelf that the customer has just bought. The second picture is the Dacron backing we put on there. For smallmouth, you probably have 50 yards would be more than enough. So you've really got enough on that spool in the second picture for two different reels. Now the third picture is the fly line. The fly lines we're using are all weight forward tapered leader lines. This particular one, the frequency boost is average price. They're around 60 bucks and they're very durable. These have, some of these lines have loops on the butt, so you can go loop to loop with your Dacron backing. If they don't have a loop on the butt, you can easily fold that over and tie an Albright knot. So although many of the lines now do have loops, once in a while you'll hit one that doesn't have it. But an Albright knot is very easy to use. Now when you crank that on, you've put your Dacron on, you put your fly line on. When you get down to the end of the fly line, you will have a loop on the end of that. Now the leader you see on the end is the 9-foot bright butt 2X leader, which we use for probably 99% of our smallmouth fishing. That has a loop on the end, so when you're going to attach that leader to the fly line, you just make a simple loop-to-loop slipping on there, then you can remove it anytime you need it. The reason we use that leader, for one thing, it tapers down very smoothly, gives great accuracy, and that 2X, that's about 10-pound test, so that's going to handle any kind of bass we're going to run into. Plus it's big enough that we can use the size flies we're going to use. Very seldom do we go bigger than a size 4 streamer or even popper. So those leaders cover the whole need we have, and they cast so well. This is a drawing of our bright butt leader. This appears in both my original bass book and in the second smallmouth bass book I wrote. What we're having here is a fly line on the left-hand end. Now, to that we're attaching 25-pound test Amnesia, which is 36 inches long. These are formulas I worked out a long time ago, and we know they work. So you've got 36 inches of 25-pound test red Amnesia. To that, we're attaching 24 inches of 20-pound test Amnesia. Now, once we get beyond that Amnesia, we switch over to clear mono. I personally like Umpqua's Omo. So we're dropping down to a 15 thousandths. And that we're putting on there with a double surgeon's knot. They're excellent knots, and they're very strong. Now notice we're only putting 12 inches of that, so we're shortening that up. The three butt sections, that 15 back to 20 back to 25, that's what makes a leader snap over. I just designed a whole new set of leaders, but that is the backbone of that leader. You'll notice when we leave that 15, drop down to 13, down to 11, boom, boom, 6 inches, 6 inches. That's what enables it to turn over. Occasionally somebody will bring in some leaders and I'll check them, and those two pieces might be 18, 20 inches long, and it casts like a noodle. It just will not turn over. Now, the last strand on the right is what we refer to as a TIPPET. That's a 2X TIPPET, which mics at .009. We put about 2 feet of that on. And that's complete. You're going to be fishing with that right now. That's on your reel. You're going to put the fly on. Now, as you change flies and change flies, obviously you're going to shorten up the TIPPET. After I get back to maybe change flies a half a dozen times, and I get back, instead of having 24 inches, maybe I'm back to 18 or something like that. Then I cut off that entire TIPPET right at that knot. You don't add TIPPET to TIPPET. First thing you know, you'll have a noodle. So I cut it off behind that knot right there. And then I put on another 2 feet of that 2X TIPPET material, and I'm good and ready to go and cast. But that leader right there is the background of what you want to get into on smallmouth fishing. I'm not going to say it's the only leader that works, but I've never found one that worked any better. So I would strongly encourage build your own, build by mine, whatever you want to do, but go by that formula because it just proved itself. This is the basic fly that we attach to our leader with an improved clinch knot. There are some other knots that I have friends are using, and I'm sure some of these other knots are good. This one really comes off when you put it on a testing machine and tie it the way we're showing there, that it's about 98% of the strength of the TIPPET. You just can't do better than that. Now let me tell you about this. The reason any knot, just this, not this knot, the reason any knot breaks is that it slips and cuts itself, boom, you just pop the leader. Any knot that isn't drawn down tightly, it's going to slip, it's going to cut itself, it's going to break way below the pound test you're expecting to get out of it. So what you're seeing up at the top, I put those wraps around there. I'm going up through the top part. That's what makes it the improved clinch. If I didn't stick that top part up through there, that would be a clinch knot. But that's not good enough for me. That's only about 85%. But this is about a 98% knot, so I stick that mono through that loop that you're seeing. I put it back right against the fly itself, and I make one solid, hard, tight pull to clinch those wraps down just as tight as I can get them. Now, don't go step by step. Put it down there, make a real tight pull, and you've got it locked in, and that's going to do everything you can expect a knot to do that's attached to the fly. This is a knot that's sometimes referred to as a surgeon's knot, sometimes as a double surgeon's knot. It is probably the strongest knot we have consistently for attaching mono to mono. The ideal thing where you really have to do this frequently is during the day when you're fishing. You've changed flies a half a dozen times. Your TIPPET, which started out as 24 inches, is now back to about 15 inches. So you cut that off behind the last knot on there, and you replace it with 2 feet of this new mono. Now, you'll see that I'm making those loose wraps from the first wrap down to the second wrap. I'm going through there the second time. Now, you got to go through there the second time or it won't have the strength. And then I'm pulling that down. In the third picture, you see how I'm snugging that up. I'm holding all 4 pieces now. And then I make one solid, strong pull that brings it down to what you see on the bottom. Now, some people say, should I lubricate it? Should I not? I lubricate saltwater knots because I'm using big flies and big TIPPET material. But in bass and trout, I don't lubricate them. But all you got to do is stick them in the water and you've lubricated them. But this is a very strong knot, easy to tie, low light, cold fingers, the whole thing. We teach all of this in our fly tying classes because as you're changing flies and changing flies, this is a must. But the double surgeon's knot, or the surgeon's knot if you want to call it that, is awfully hard to beat. There are some other knots you can use that are excellent, but this is probably the standard. But call us if you have any questions on this. There's constantly a question from fly fishermen, especially beginners, about what size fly can I attach to what size leader. I've got a trout leader I've been using, but I want to go bass fishing this afternoon. Well, you can really get in a lot of trouble in a hurry. This is a formula that I played with a long time ago that I find really simplifies that. If you take the size fly you're going to use, divide it by the constant of 3, and that tells you what you're going to use. You'll see there I'm talking about the example is a size 6 fly divided by the 3, the constant of 3, and it says 2x leader. That really isn't going to get you in trouble anywhere you go. And it applies in all of those fly sizes. See, seldom are we going so much bigger than a 4, and seldom do we go smaller than a 8. But the fly size divided by 3 equals your TIPPET in X's, and you can fudge a little bit one size or the other on that TIPPET. I wouldn't recommend it, but a little bit isn't going to kill anything. But that is a good way to find out what size fly you're going to put on there. Now, when we're fishing small mountain streams, as you see here, and we have some wonderful mountain streams up and down the East Coast, there again, you'll need to know what size TIPPET to use for the size flies you're using. Now, the majority of this fishing, we're using a size 14 or 16 dry fly or nymph, sometimes a little bigger, sometimes a little smaller. But the 14, 16 is the meat and potatoes for what we use on all these streams. There again, in order to come up with your TIPPET size, fly size that we know we're going to be using, divided by the constant of 3 equals your TIPPET in X's. Now, obviously, that doesn't come out to a nice even round number. So we've found through experience that we can cheat a little bit and probably either use a 5 or a 6X leader. I'm more inclined to use a 6. But we'll use this on our 6-foot leaders, our 7.5-foot leaders. It does an excellent job. But the fly size divided by 3 equals your TIPPET and X's, and you're basically going to stay 5 or 6X. This is the second book I wrote on smallmouth fishing. What I had my artist do on this book was draw the knots that we use for our smallmouth fishing. There are only a few that you need. You need a knot to put the TIPPET on. You need a knot to attach the fly, and really those two which we teach in our class. You're out here day by day fishing. What are you doing? You're going to replace your TIPPET, you're going to replace your flies. So those are the basic knots you're going to use. Now, also in this, we have included the formulas for the leaders that we're using. Although the majority of the time we're using a 9-foot 2X bright butt leader, there might be a time later in the year that you want to taper on down to a finer leader, or earlier in the year when you're throwing great big flies that you want to use a larger leader. These formulas are all in this book, and they're showing you exactly how to do them. So if you have any questions on all of this, just ring me and I'll be glad to help you on all this. This is Harry Murray at Murray's Fly Shop in Edinburgh, Virginia.